So the 2023 cycle for the Oklahoma Sooners and pretty much college football is wrapping up. And as we prepare to head into 2024 and look at the potential recruiting options for Oklahoma, I kind of want to give you guys an early breakdown of who I think Oklahoma could get as commitments in this class, where I think they could potentially end up in a composite score ranking, and try to just give you guys the early in to where I think this recruiting is going to go. Now, I'm going to talk about first players that I think are going to be committed to Oklahoma at the end of the 2024 cycle. But before we get into it, please go ahead, hit that like and the subscribe button. Let me know what you guys are thinking down in the comments below. Is there a specific player that you guys are excited for, looking to target in 2024 for the Sooners? Or is there somebody specifically that you want to see them go after? Okay, so I think the first place that we have to start out is talking about the composite score ranking of where I think the Sooners are going to end up. So, realistically, I think the Sooners, again, end anywhere between 25, 30 commits. And you probably see them end up with a composite score anywhere from 295. I think you could go as high as maybe 315, which, when you look at it, could be the best composite score ranking the Oklahoma Sooners have probably ever gotten, and definitely a mark that could be left from Brent Venables. And we have talked about so much about Brent Venables and just what this 2024 class means to him, to the fans, and potentially, starting this dynasty that we want to see him start at the University of Oklahoma. And in 2023, he's had a pretty good start by not only getting Jackson Arnold, but Peyton Bowen and PJ Adebayor as well. So we're going to start on the defensive line, and there's two notable 5-stars that I think we got to talk about. Obviously, I think these are both 5-stars that Oklahoma is pretty much for sure going to land, and that's going to be David Stone, who is the top 10 player, or he's a top 10 player in the country, and 247 Sports themselves has him as a top 5. He's been crystal balled by Wiltfong, Drum. You see a couple predictions come in for Michigan State, but I really don't think that those have any merit, just because those are from Michigan State insiders. They're not from, Andrew Ivins. He's just a Southeast recruiting coordinator. And then you got Joey Joey Heimeyer, and then Parker Thune, Brandon Drum, and then, of course, Steve Wiltfong, who is the director. So David Stone, I think he ends up a Sooner. And I'm curious to see if David Stone ends up back at Oklahoma to play his senior season. Now, whether he ends up at Del City or ends up maybe somewhere else like Oklahoma City, Edmond, Tulsa, that's going to be maybe the thing to watch. But I definitely think he ends up back at Oklahoma. But then you've got Williams. I'm going to try to say this right. Nwaneri. And he's out of Lee Summit North. Good friends with Caden Green. And one of the big things here is Lee Summit North is kind of becoming a huge recruiting hotspot for the University of Oklahoma. Now, Williams Nwaneri, he is the number 3 overall player per 247 Sports. And in the composite, the number 17 overall player. So you guys might hear a theme here. I'm going off of 247. I just really like their ranking system. And I usually go off the composite, but when they're this highly ranked by 247, we definitely need to talk about that as well. So Todd Bates and Miguel Chavis, they're in this recruitment for Williams. And listen, I think this is pretty much a done deal. I think Oklahoma has pretty much sold him, especially with a lot of his teammates loving Oklahoma as well. This is, I think, a recruitment that it's going to be hard for Oklahoma to mess it up. And ultimately, I think he ends up here. Now, he's got other Power 5 offers from Notre Dame, Penn State, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, all of those places. So, it's definitely not going to be just, a sign on the dotted line. It's a done deal, but, it's someone that I think Oklahoma definitely has a good foothold on. And I think ultimately at the end of the 2024 cycle, you will see Williams in a Oklahoma jersey. So the next up is, and this is probably going to be an unpopular pick with some people, but hear me out on this. And it's actually Charles Lester. Now, some folks might tell you that I'm a little off my rocker because that is a 5-star cornerback. And again, Oklahoma has not historically recruited the secondary this well. But with the addition of Peyton Bowen, I think that helps because it shows that Oklahoma can go out there and recruit elite talent like this. But then also, you have Woody Washington, who has been developed by Oklahoma. You're going to have C.J. Colden go be a top, I would say, within the first 3 rounds. So Oklahoma is developing their quarterbacks. And I think that is going to go a long way in the recruitment of Charles Lester. Jay Valai and Brandon Hall are going to be able to point that out. And I think with Charles Lester, who has taken, I want to say it's either 2 or 3 unofficial visits to Oklahoma, this is a big deal. And you know what? If he takes another unofficial or maybe even an official, if I had a crystal ball, I'd put one in for him at that point because that's definitely an interesting recruitment. And again, another 5-star that Oklahoma could ultimately just go up there and land, sink the deal. It would be great start to the secondary recruiting for Brandon Hall and Jay Valai, and we'll get more into that here in a little bit. So now we're going to transition into the 4-stars. Now, these two are highly rated 4-stars and guys that I think really could be 5-stars by the end of the cycle. The first one is Nigel Smith II, the 6'5", 260-pound defensive lineman out of Melissa, Texas. And listen, we've had him on the podcast. We've done an interview with him. I really like Oklahoma's chances with this. One important thing to note about Nigel Smith is he has taken, I think, like 6 visits to Ohio State officials. So Oklahoma's going to be going up against Larry Johnson. Now, that's going to be tough, but ultimately with Ohio State being, I think it's like 881 miles away from Melissa, Texas, and OU only being 141, I think Oklahoma's got a really good shot here. I will definitely be trying to make it down to watch Nigel Smith this upcoming senior season for him. But in 2021, he had 66 tackles, 20 tackles for loss, 10 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. This is a guy that I think, again, he could be an anchor for the defense. And, yeah, I would be really excited to see Nigel Smith in an Oklahoma uniform. Again, a guy that he's right there on the cusp of being a 5-star, ranked number 36 nationally. So, you just literally move up a couple spots, and he's right there. Another guy that you guys need to be paying attention to is Zena Umeozulu. Now, Zena is from Allen, Texas, and if the Sooners land the quarterback Michael Hawkins, I expect them to be able to land Zena as well. Now, if you don't land Hawkins, now all of a sudden I think Zena is a little bit harder. But he does have a brother, Nito Umeozulu, and he plays offensive line at Texas currently. So this one's interesting to me because if we land Zena, I definitely think you could potentially see Nito hit the portal, especially if he's not getting any significant playing time at Texas, and potentially flip a 4-star offensive lineman and a top 100 player in 2022 in the transfer portal to Oklahoma, which, the offensive line is always a spot where you could utilize a little bit more depth. And 2 more guys on the defensive line that I think you guys need to be paying attention to. Eddie Pierre-Louis and Zadavian Sims. So Zadavian Sims is out of Durant, Oklahoma. I 100% expect him to be a Sooner. The staff is trying to focus on recruiting the elite talent in the state of Oklahoma. And Zadavian Sims is elite talent. And he got offered in the spring of 2022 by the staff and has since, things have gone really well. So I'd expect him to be here. Eddie Pierre-Louis, I believe he's actually being recruited to the offensive line, which, that's not uncommon in high school to see a defensive lineman switch over to the offensive line. So that would be interesting to see if, maybe he's going to technically classify as a defensive line recruit, but ultimately I think it's going to come down to what would he rather play. Would he rather play in the defensive line or the offensive line? The offensive line doesn't necessarily, it's not the sexy position, right? You're not getting all the hype and the talk and the fame. Even on the defensive line, you can get that. So it's just going to depend on exactly, what his goals are, where he wants to play. So going back to the secondary, looking at a couple 4-stars here. Aaron Flowers, love the position that Oklahoma's in with him. Xavier Philisami, this is a guy who's taken numerous visits as well, a guy that I think Oklahoma's good in. Jordan Johnson-Rubel, another guy that's taken several unofficial visits to Oklahoma. And then, of course, Eli Bowen. His brother's here. Why would he not want to come play with his brother? We'll just go ahead and say he's a Sooner, even though he has not committed yet. Moving to the linebackers. Right now, the only one that I feel even comfortable saying Oklahoma is for sure possibly going to land is Peyton Pierce, the 4-star linebacker. I don't really feel confident. I know there are some other talent out there at the linebacker position, specifically with, I believe his name is Sammy Watkins. He's the number one linebacker overall in this class for 2024. But I just don't think you're going to be able to land that kind of talent at the linebacker position yet, just because I think OU's got a lot to prove. And I think the linebackers, especially those elite guys like that, they're going to want to see a lot more out of Oklahoma and a lot more consistency at that position and putting guys into the league. Not saying that it's out of the realm of possibility for it to ever happen. I just think, Oklahoma needs to put in a little bit more work there. So Peyton Pierce is definitely an option. It wasn't Sammy Watkins. It was Sammy Brown out of Jefferson, Georgia, which that's another thing. A lot of these top-tier linebackers, they're coming out of places like Georgia and Florida, which, yes, we have recruited well in the state of Florida, but, again, it's something that I think OU is going to have to prove themselves before they can go out there and land a Sammy Brown or a Miles Graham or DeMarcus Riddick, both of whom are all either committed to Florida, Georgia, or have Florida, Georgia in their top 5. So next up, looking at the list, we got the quarterback, Michael Hawkins. We talked about this. Hawkins has taken 4 unofficial visits from what I've been able to find. I expect him to land as a Sooner. His dad was an OU cornerback in 2005 to 2009. Seems like he has a good relationship with Lebby, and I would be curious to see, what his thoughts are about potentially sitting behind Jackson Arnold for a little bit, unless Jackson Arnold just ends up not being what we think he could be, which I think there's a very, very low chance of that. I think Jackson Arnold has a lot of upside, but that's going to be an interesting situation. So one thing you're going to note here about this staff recruiting quarterbacks is they're specifically going to take multiple quarterbacks either every cycle or one every cycle and try to stack that quarterback room like what you see at an Ohio State, right? You got to be able to provide depth there. You can't have what we had in 2022 where Dylan Gabriel goes down and you don't have a serviceable backup to be able to go out there and throw the ball, and you ultimately get beat 49-0 to Texas. Yes, I said it because if you would have had Dylan Gabriel in that game, we probably would have put up, 28, 30 points. So that's just where I feel on that one. On the offensive line, so far, I don't think we're getting a ton of talent there. But, again, as the cycle progresses, you're going to see Oklahoma get in on some recruitments, especially as guys maybe commit elsewhere or fall off. But we got Casey Poe, the offensive lineman. I actually just did an interview with him, so I think you guys should potentially be seeing that probably this week. You guys should probably be seeing that this week. But, so Casey Poe, I really like him. He's 6'5", 280 pounds out of Lindell, Texas. Listen, there's a lot of things to like about him as he plays shot put and discs. And, a guy that I think ultimately he when you talk to him, when you watch his film, this is a guy that I think would succeed in a Bill Bedenbaugh offensive line. He just has that drive to go out there and be great. And I think that's what you need in an offensive lineman. Additionally, looking down the list, you've got Grant Bricks and Daniel Cruz. Daniel Cruz has taken 3 unofficial visits to Oklahoma. And, if he goes and he takes an official visit, hey, OU's going to be in a really good position there. It's going to be really hard to beat out the Texas schools, though, for him, as, you have numerous Texas schools looking at him. At the tight end position, you've got Carter Nelson. This one's tough because right now I have him committed in this class. But there's a good chance that Nebraska could try to keep this man in their state. So he's 6'4", 205-pound tight end out of Ainsworth, Nebraska. And, just like Brent Venables is making an attempt to keep guys in the state of Oklahoma playing for OU, right? Matt Rule's going to do the same thing at Nebraska. He's going to make sure guys stay in Nebraska, especially the elite top talent. He just did it with Malachi Coleman. So in 2021, he had 28 receptions, 511 yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. On the defensive side of the ball, he had 34 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and 1 interception. So Carter is a guy that can do it all. If the Sooners don't land him, that's fine. The tight ends, there's always some in the portal, and you never know. You could try to get in on one in this 24 class that maybe we're not looking at. And in 25, you also have, I can't think of the kid's name, but there's a guy in 25 that actually is in Allen, Texas that loves Michael Hawkins. And if OU lands Michael Hawkins, I would think OU is the favorite to land that 5-star tight end. So that's something you guys potentially want to keep your eyes peeled on as well. As of, I can't remember the last time OU got a 5-star tight end. So at the wide receiver position, you got Bryant Wesco, and this one's going to be an interesting battle for the Oklahoma Sooners because Wesco has only taken 2 visits, 1 to Oklahoma and 1 to TCU. And one of the things is about Wesco's recruitment is the Sooners, I think, have a good shot at him because his sister is playing soccer here in Norman. Now, mind you, OU just landed a 5-star safety because, well, his girlfriend was playing soccer in Norman. So there's already familiarity with this program, with campus. And as the staff starts to figure out who's going to be the wide receiver coach and the direction for that, I would expect that Bryant Wesco is going to end up being a Sooner. There are a couple other options at the wide receiver position, so don't freak out when you don't hear me say any more for a while, but we'll get into that here in a minute. Running backs, Caden Durham. I don't need to say anymore. Caden Durham's a boss. For the 3 stars, you've got on the linebacker position, Drew Woodis, and then Davon Keys. The thing about Davon Keys is he does have a crystal ball to go to Oklahoma State, but he's taken 3 unofficial visits to OU over 2021 through 2022. So something maybe keep your eyes on as he is a frequent visitor to Norman. You could also be looking at the wide receiver position, 3-star Josiah Martin out of Denton Geyer. Imagine that, Denton Geyer. That's potentially an option. Someone that I would expect probably is going to be the main wide receiver up there this year. I don't know who the quarterback is, though. So that's something you guys might want to keep your eye on. As far as guys that are currently not ranked in the composite, you got offensive lineman Harrison Utley, safety Dax Collins, defensive lineman Tyler Moore, and the athlete Cole Mathis. Those are guys you guys potentially want to keep your eyes on, but I think guys that could definitely be landing in this class. So let's pivot to guys in the 2024 cycle that I think you guys should watch. The first one being the 5-star wide receiver Micah Hudson. So he visited OU on September 24th of 2022, and I really think this one might be a long shot as he's taken 4 visits to A&M, 2 to Texas, and I'm not sure where his love lies between those 2 schools or, if he grew up even loving those 2 schools. I think that's going to be a determining factor here is, did he grow up loving Texas or Texas A&M, or is he just taking the visits to A&M because, well, that's what's hot, and that's what everybody loves? So I'd be curious to see if LaDamian Washington, Jeff Lebby, or any of these guys can really get in here on the recruitment of Micah Hudson. Additionally, a guy you guys have to keep an eye out for is 5-star safety KJ Bolden. So KJ Bolden, again, a top 10 player in this class, and this would be a huge win for the Sooners because At that point in 2024, you would expect Billy Bowman is gone going to the draft in 2020 at the end of the 2023 season. So you'd be wanting to bring in a guy like KJ Bolden, who potentially could be starting for you right away. Again, we talked about landing Peyton Bowen. It puts you in a good position, shows you that you can go out there and recruit that position, or at least recruit in the secondary pretty well. And yeah, I think if they can get him on campus for an official here, they have a good shot. Now, the KJ Bolden has taken 2 visits since Brent Venables has been Oklahoma. They've been unofficials. The important thing to note is he's been to Georgia like 10 times, but he is from Buford, Georgia, so you can't really take that for what you think it is. Ultimately, KJ Bolden has potentially flirted with the idea of Colorado as well. So, Deion Sanders, it's something that we got to keep our eye on. All right. Looking at 5-star quarterback Dylan Raiola. So, if you guys are 247 insiders, you'll know that Parker said that this is a name to watch because Dylan had interest in OU when Tebow was here. And he's intrigued potentially by Levy's system, and he would actually be willing to sit for 2 years. So he would be willing to be the future quarterback, knowing, hey, he probably only needs a year or two to really be able to put it together to go to the league. So that's potentially something that you guys need to keep an eye on. I think it's a really long shot because I think he ultimately ends up at Nebraska because the only staff member that Nebraska retained from the previous regime was Dylan Raiola's uncle on the offensive line coach. So, again, take it for a grain of salt, but it's something that you guys potentially definitely need to be keeping your eyes out for. Then we got the 4-star running back Taylor Tatum. So, again, you got to be able to go out there and you got to beat Texas schools, Baylor, A&M, and Texas. But ultimately, I think OU maybe only takes 1 running back in this class as there's a lot of depth at the running back position for them anyways, going into 2023 and potentially returning in 2024. The only way that I think, you see them potentially go after maybe 2 or 3 running backs is if maybe Gavin Sawchuk decides that he's not getting the touches that he maybe wanted and decides to transfer to Colorado, where I think his brother will end up going, and it's home for them. So that's something you definitely want to keep your eye on. Another guy you guys could be looking out for, 4-star offensive tackle Michael Uni, and then 4-star wide receiver Jeremiah McClellan. Now, I have Jeremiah McClellan in the rankings and the composite score rankings that I gave you guys through the class calculator, but I'm not 100% sold on him, but I kind of wanted to give Oklahoma another receiver there just because I know we'll probably end up taking one. Another guy that you could be potentially looking out for if Oklahoma loses out on any of the safeties up above is 3-star safety Keenan Kelly. So I think OU takes the 4-star safeties that I told you about earlier, and they potentially save a spot for KJ Bolden. Keenan Kelly could be either a late flip or if KJ Bolden just tells Oklahoma early, hey, listen, you're no longer in it. But he's taken numerous unofficial visits to OU, and you'd believe that they are the leader here. If they really want him, they could get him. So, like I said, Oklahoma has the potential to really, they're going to have the best recruiting class they've ever had in 2024. And they have a chance to land not 1, not 2, but maybe 3 of the best recruits you've ever seen in an Oklahoma uniform. One being David Stone, and I'm looking at his composite score ranking now, 994,229. So that would put him at it put him within the top 15 of OU recruits. But, by the end of the cycle, he definitely could be, top 10. You saw most recently jump into that top 10 at number 7, Jackson Arnold. But you've also had Spencer Rattler, Jaden Hazelwood, Caleb Williams. Topping off the best recruits of all time for Oklahoma is Adrian Peterson at 1 and Rhett Bomar at 2. So go ahead, jump down in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think about this 2024 class. And I know I talked fast, so you guys might have to go back and rewatch it. But is there a specific recruit that you guys are hoping that OU goes out there, gives an offer to, and signs? And do you think that there is, and where do you think this class lands in terms of composite score ranking?